Hey everyone, welcome to US Daily Beat. It's Friday, August 21st, 2026, and I'm so glad you're here. We've got some really interesting stories for you today. Israel reestablishes closed West Bank settlement, defying growing. Russian double tap drone strike kills 15 in Ukrainian mall, officials say. Royal Mail misses delivery targets again, but hails encouraging signs. But real quick before we dive in, if you'd like to support the channel, go ahead and subscribe and give this video a like. It genuinely means the world to us, and it's what keeps this show going every single day. All right, with that said, let's get into it. So, first up today, we're looking at world news. In the occupied West Bank, a place that was officially closed for years is now being opened back up by Israel, and that's triggering fresh anger far beyond the region. According to reports, about 30 so-called pioneer families have moved in, backed by a surge of nationalist support inside Israel's government. For supporters, this is about reclaiming land and pushing forward a long-standing political vision. But for nearby Palestinian residents, the return of settlers is happening fast, and it's leaving people fearful about what comes next. To understand why this matters, you have to know the West Bank is already one of the most sensitive flashpoints in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Settlements there are widely viewed as illegal under international law, and many countries have been warning Israel not to expand them. So, when a closed settlement is reopened, it's not just a local housing story, it's a move with big political and security consequences. And for anyone watching this conflict, the big question is whether this sparks more unrest on the ground and whether international pressure changes anything at all. All right, so in world news, a busy shopping center in Ukraine became the latest site of a devastating attack, and officials say at least 15 people were killed and more than 130 others were hurt, including 23 children. The regional head says the strike hit a mall and then a so-called double tap followed, meaning a second Uder came after the first one, often when people are rushing in to help the wounded. That's what makes these attacks so terrifying. They're not just about destruction, they can also trap rescuers and bystanders in the danger zone. This comes against the backdrop of Russia's war in Ukraine, where drone and missile attacks have become a grim part of daily life, especially far from the front lines. For people watching this from outside the region, it's a reminder that civilian spaces are still being hit, and that the human toll keeps rising. What we'll be watching next is whether there's confirmation of the weapon used, how rescuers are able to respond safely, and whether this leads to any new pressure from Ukraine's allies for tighter air defenses and more support. All right, so in business and finance, if you've sent a letter or a parcel lately, you know how much people notice when the postal system is running even a little off. And that's why the latest update from Royal Mail matters. The company says it's seeing some encouraging signs in how it's performing, but it still missed the delivery targets set by the regulator. In plain English, that means service has improved in some areas, but not enough to hit the standards it's supposed to meet. This comes against a pretty tough backdrop for Royal Mail, which has been under pressure for years from falling letter volumes, higher costs, and frustration over reliability. For households and small businesses, that's not just a corporate problem. It affects whether bills, contracts, birthday cards, and online orders arrive when they're meant to. What we'll be watching next is whether these improvements actually stick. Because the big question for you and me is simple. Is this the start of a real turnaround, or just another sign that Royal Mail is still trying to catch up with expectations? Now, let's talk about business and finance. With a U.S. trade deadline getting closer, the politics around Canada's next move are getting a lot more tense. Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew is saying Canada should fight, and that's a pretty clear sign that even if Ottawa reaches some kind of deal with Washington, it may not be an easy sell at home. Here's the backdrop. Canada and the U.S. are deeply tied together through trade, which means decisions on tariffs or market access can hit businesses, jobs, and prices pretty quickly. So when trade talks get rocky, it's not just a government story. It can affect what we pay for products, how companies plan, and how stable the economy feels. What Kinew's comments really highlight is the political challenge facing Prime Minister Mark Carney. If there's a deal on the table, he'll need Canadians to believe it's worth it. And that can be hard if people feel the U.S. is pushing too hard. So, what should we watch next? Whether Ottawa tries to strike a compromise, how provinces react, and whether Canadian leaders start drawing a firmer line as the deadline approaches. Switching gears here, this one's about technology. If you've ever wondered how much your apps know about you, This story is a pretty big reminder to pay attention. TikTok is set to pay $400 million to the US in a major settlement over child privacy concerns, and it comes out of a 2024 lawsuit that accused TikTok and its parent company, ByteDance, of collecting huge amounts of data on millions of users under the age of 13. That's the heart of this case: privacy, kids, and how tech companies handle personal information when young people are on the platform. The allegation is that the app didn't just have a few issues here and there, but that it was gathering far more data than it should have from children. Now, TikTok has become such a huge part of online life that this matters well beyond one company. It raises the bigger question we all run into: who's watching, what's being tracked, and how much control do we really have once we tap accept? We should also watch what this means for other platforms. Settlements like this can push companies to tighten their rules, change how they verify ages, and rethink how they collect data. And for families, it's another reason to keep an eye on the apps kids are using every day. Next up, we've got a story from technology. If you've ever had your Saturday morning interrupted by the roar of a gas-powered leaf blower, you already know why this story matters. Around the landscaping world, there's a steady push to switch over to electric equipment, which is quieter, cleaner, and usually easier on the people using it day after day. In theory, it's a pretty straightforward upgrade: less noise in the neighborhood, fewer emissions, and less fumes for workers to breathe. But the transition is moving slower than some advocates would like. A big reason is practical, not ideological. Crews need tools that can handle long workdays, tough conditions, and big properties, and not every electric mower, trimmer, or blower has matched gas gear on battery life, power, or cost. For small businesses especially, replacing an entire fleet can be expensive, and charging logistics can be a headache. Still, this is a shift we should keep an eye on because it affects what our neighborhoods sound like, how crews work, and how quickly everyday outdoor jobs go electric. The big question now is whether better batteries and stronger rules can speed things up. And finally today, something from politics. If you've been watching for clues about the UK government's finances, this latest number is one to keep an eye on. In July, the government borrowed more than economists had expected, which adds a little more pressure on Chancellor John Healey as he gets ready to deliver his first budget. The basic issue here is that when tax income doesn't cover what the government is spending, it has to borrow to make up the gap. And July's borrowing figure suggests the public finances are still a bit more stretched than hoped. Healey says the government is committed to meeting its fiscal rules, which is basically his way of saying, we're not planning to let the numbers get out of hand. Why should we care? Because budget season is where the big decisions start to come into focus. If borrowing is running hotter than expected, the government may have less room to maneuver on spending, taxes, or both. So when Healey stands up to deliver that first budget, markets, businesses, and ordinary taxpayers will all be listening closely for what gets protected, what gets trimmed, and who might end up paying for the gap. And that's it for today's US Daily Beat. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. And listen, if you'd like to support the channel and help us keep going, please do subscribe and give this video a like. It truly makes all the difference. Turn on notifications too, so you never miss tomorrow's episode. I'll be back with more news in the morning. Until then, take care, and I'll see you tomorrow.